The year was 1865, and the frontier had not yet learned the meaning of peace. Dust hung in the air like a held breath as Sister Margaret stepped down from the supply wagon, her boots sinking into the hard-packed earth of Redemption Crossing. The chapel bell had not rung in months. Windows were boarded. Men watched from doorways with hands near their holsters. She pressed her fingers together beneath her sleeves and whispered a prayer that sounded thin against the wind. She had taken her vows in a stone convent far east of here, where faith was measured by silence and service, not by how fast a man could draw. Obedience had brought her west with bandages and bread, with letters from a bishop who believed mercy could still stitch this land together. She believed it too, or had believed it, until she saw the scars on the town, until she smelled old smoke and newer fear. Redemption Crossing looked like a place that chewed promises and spat them back dry. The trading post door burst open with a crack like a rifle shot. Shouts followed. A chair overturned. Sister Margaret turned toward the sound, heart hammering, the world narrowing to noise and motion. A man stumbled out, clutching his side, blood soaking his shirt. Another voice barked an order. Then the first real shot rang out, sharp and final, and the town lurched into violence. She moved without thinking. Years of tending fevers and fractures carried her forward. She knelt beside the fallen man as bullets chewed splinters from the post behind her. The smell of powder burned her throat. He was young, eyes wide, breath rattling. She pressed cloth to the wound and spoke his name, though she did not know it, spoke to keep him anchored. He died anyway, breath leaving him like a last confession, and the sound of it split something open inside her. Hands grabbed her arm and hauled her back. "Stay down," a voice said, rough and urgent. She looked up into a face lined by sun and restraint, a brim shadowing eyes that missed nothing. He shoved her behind a water trough and took a knee, revolver steady. The gunfire ended as quickly as it began, leaving a ringing quiet that felt worse than noise. When he glanced at her again, his mouth tightened. "You all right, sister?" She nodded because it was easier than speaking. Around them, men cursed and counted. A body lay in the dust. Someone laughed, high and brittle. The cowboy rose, cautious, and offered a hand. She took it, surprised by the warmth of his grip. He released her at once, as if remembering himself. "Name's Caleb Harlan," he said. "This place isn't safe." The truth of that settled over her like a weight. She gathered her skirts and went back to the young man, though she already knew there was nothing left to do. She closed his eyes. The vow she had spoken years ago felt distant, a promise made to a quieter world. She stood and faced the street, its watching faces and lowered gazes. Mercy, she realized, did not always arrive in time. They buried the dead before the sun slipped west. Sister Margaret spoke the words, her voice steady despite the hollow in her chest. Caleb watched from the edge, hat in hand. When the last amen faded, he stepped closer. "There'll be more," he said softly. "Men who don't like witnesses." She wanted to argue, to insist on the strength of faith and community, but the wind carried the echo of the shot, and she saw again the young man's eyes. That night, she packed what remained of the supplies. At dawn, she would leave. The horse stamped as she loaded the saddlebags, hands trembling now that there was time to feel. Caleb stood nearby, tightening a cinch, saying nothing. When she finished, she turned to him. "I can't abandon them." "You already did what you could," he replied. "Staying won't save anyone." She searched his face for cruelty and found none. Only a careful mercy earned the hard way. The road stretched pale and empty beyond the town. She took a breath, feeling the weight of her vow shift, not break. "Will you take me as far as the river?" He met her gaze, then nodded once. "I will." As they rode out, Redemption Crossing shrinking behind them, Sister Margaret understood the frontier was no longer a place she served from the edges. It had reached for her, and she had answered. The sun climbed, bleaching color from the land, and with it rose a silence that pressed close. They rode, single file, the town's fences dissolving into scrub and sky. Sister Margaret felt every mile like a question. She remembered the convent garden, the measured hours, the certainty of rules. Here, certainty wore a gun. Caleb glanced back once, checking her seat, then forward again, watchful. He rode like a man accustomed to endings. By midday, they reached a dry arroyo where tracks braided the dust. Caleb reined in, studying the ground. "We're not alone," he said. The words were calm, but his hand rested near the butt of his revolver. She felt fear rise, clean and sharp, and with it a strange resolve. If this road demanded more than prayers, she would give more. She loosened the bandages at her side, made ready without being told. A shadow moved on the ridge, then another. Caleb's jaw set. He angled his horse to put himself between her and the rise. "When I say run," he said, "you run." She met his eyes and shook her head. "When you say run," she answered, "we run." For the first time, he smiled, surprised. The wind shifted. Somewhere a rifle clicked. Sister Margaret felt the frontier lean toward them, testing the shape of their courage, and she held fast, knowing the choice she had made would be measured in blood and mercy ahead. The ridge erupted with sound. A rifle cracked, and dust leapt near Caleb's boot. He swore once and fired back, the report rolling across the arroyo. Sister Margaret's horse danced, whites of its eyes flashing, but she held fast, breath measured, the world narrowing to motion and choice. Another shot answered, closer this time, and Caleb kicked his mount forward, drawing fire, giving her the moment he'd promised. They ran. Hooves thundered through the wash as bullets hissed overhead. The arroyo twisted, shallow banks offering no cover, and then the land opened, a hard stretch of scrub and sun. A third rider crested the ridge, shouting, confidence riding the sound. Caleb veered toward a stand of cottonwoods clinging to a dry bend, urging speed. A round tore through his hat brim and vanished. He laughed short and sharp, the sound of a man alive by habit. They reached the trees and slid from the saddle. Caleb fired twice, measured, and the shout cut off. Silence followed, thin and deceptive. Sister Margaret pressed her back to bark, heart slamming, hands steady despite it. She tore a strip from her sleeve and bound a shallow crease on Caleb's forearm where lead had kissed skin. He watched her work, eyes dark with appraisal. "You don't shake," he said. "Most do." "I've learned to keep my hands useful," she replied, nodding cloth tight. He nodded, accepting the truth without comment. They waited until the heat settled and the wind carried only grass and insects. When they moved again, it was west, toward the river he'd named, toward a horizon that refused promises. The land tested them at once. Water ran thin, then vanished. By dusk, their mouths were chalk. Sister Margaret rationed sips, her mind counting care and consequence. Caleb watched the sky, reading signs she could not. "Storm broke north," he said. "We'll find a crossing by morning." Night fell hard. Coyotes stitched the dark with song. They built a fire small, as a secret. Caleb shared dried meat. She shared bread gone stale, but still faithful. The flames carved their faces from shadow. He spoke of roads and debts, of a war that taught him to keep moving. She spoke of rooms with stone floors and vows spoken in candlelight. Neither tried to persuade the other. Understanding grew in the quiet spaces between words. Before dawn, the sound came. A low rustle, then a hiss. The fire snapped as something slid too close. Caleb rose, slow, hand out. "Back," he whispered. The rattler coiled, head lifted, anger singing. Sister Margaret felt the old fears surge, then fall into order. She grabbed a branch, struck the ground hard. The snake struck air. Caleb shot once. The body stilled. She exhaled. He looked at her with a grin that held relief and respect. "Useful hands," he said again. The river greeted them with a lie. From the bank, it looked tame, brown and broad. At the ford, it roared, swollen from distant rain. Caleb tested depth with a pole, frowning. "We go light," he said. They stripped packs, tied ropes. Midstream, the current took Sister Margaret's legs and tore her under. Cole bit. Sound vanished. A hand closed on her collar and hauled. She surfaced choking, clung, kicked. Caleb's face was a blur of effort and grit. They staggered to the far bank, shaking, laughing without humor. He wrapped her in his coat. She let herself lean just long enough. Beyond the river lay a burned homestead, boards blackened, earth-scarred. A woman's shoe lay in the dirt. Sister Margaret knelt, anger threading her prayer. Mercy had been here and fled. Caleb scanned tracks, jaw set. Men who don't want witnesses, he said, same as before. The choice rose between them, unspoken and heavy. She met his gaze. Then we don't look away. They followed the trail into broken hills. A man lay bleeding where the path narrowed, a stranger with fear in his eyes and guilt in his breath. Caleb's hand hovered near his gun. Sister Margaret knelt, already working. Help him, she said, not pleading, commanding by example. Caleb cursed, then tore cloth. Together they saved the man, who wept and spoke names and numbers. When he fled, alive, Caleb watched him go. You choose trouble, he said. She wiped her hands, blood drying dark. I choose people. The words surprised her with their certainty. He considered, then nodded once. As dusk bled into the hills, riders appeared on the ridge, more than before, rifles catching light. Caleb checked his cylinder, calm settling like a second skin. Sister Margaret tightened her grip on the bandages, heart steady. Faith no longer a shield but a direction. The land leaned in again, measuring them, and they stood ready, knowing the next test would ask everything. They took cover among rocks as the riders spread, circling with practiced patience. Caleb whispered distances, angles, the language of survival learned young. She listened, absorbing cadence and intent, and when he paused, she touched his sleeve. I will draw them, she said. He stared, disbelief flaring, then calculation. You won't outrun a horse, he said. No, she answered, but I can slow men who think mercy is weakness. She stepped into the open with hands raised, habit dark against the pale ground. Shouts followed, cruel and eager. A shot snapped close. She did not run. She walked, counting breaths, meeting eyes that faltered at the sight of her calm. Caleb fired from cover, precise, scattering them. Confusion rippled. A horse reared. Another rider cursed and fell. The circle broke. When the dust settled, the hills held their silence. Caleb approached her slowly, anger and awe wrestling in his face. Don't do that again, he said. She met his gaze, steady. Then don't ask me to be smaller than the moment. He laughed, a sound edged with relief. Together they gathered what they could and moved on, night closing like a promise neither fully trusted yet. Ahead, a town's distant lamps flickered, and with them the certainty that mercy and violence would soon demand final payment from them both. The lamps of St. Elias burned low and watchful, a necklace of yellow eyes strung along the crooked street. Sister Margaret felt their gaze as she and Caleb entered, dust-streaked, tired and unbowed. Music leaked from the saloon in a thin, broken line. Somewhere glass shattered. The town smelled of whiskey, sweat, and fear learned early. Caleb slowed, hand loose near his revolver, reading faces, exits, angles. She walked beside him, spine straight, vow steady, knowing this was the place where roads ended or changed their names. They had not taken 10 steps before the door swung open, and a man laughed too loudly. Others followed, boots scraping, hands heavy at their belts. The circle formed without hurry. The leader wore a coat cut fine enough to lie about respectability. His eyes slid to Sister Margaret and stuck. Evening, he said. Didn't expect a sermon. Caleb answered with silence. Sister Margaret met the man's gaze. We're passing through, she said. Let us pass. Her voice carried, calm and plain. The laugh died. The leader smiled, thin as a blade. Mercy's dear here, he said. What do you pay with? A shot rang out. No one could say who fired first. The street exploded. Caleb moved, fast and sure, shoving her behind a hitching post as lead chewed wood. He fired, rolled, fired again. Men scattered, shouting. Sister Margaret pressed herself flat, counting breaths, listening to the music of chaos she had learned. When a body fell near her, she crawled, dragged him back, saw the wound, made the choice. Blood slicked her hands. She tied, pressed, whispered. The man lived. Caleb took a hit then, a sudden jerk, a grunt swallowed by noise. He stumbled and went down hard behind a barrel. Sister Margaret's heart kicked. She ran to him through smoke and splinters. The world narrowed to the line of his body, and the work her hands knew. He was bleeding bad, leg torn. "Stay," he said, teeth bared. "They'll finish you." She shook her head and worked. Around them the fight raged, close now, boots pounding. She felt fear, but it did not own her. She bound, tightened, cut cloth until her fingers burned. A shadow fell. The leader stood over them, gun leveled, eyes bright. "Time's up," he said. She rose. Not fast, not slow. She placed herself between the gun and the man on the ground. "No," she said, and meant more than refusal. She spoke of names and faces, of the man she had buried, of the woman's shoe in the dirt, of mercy not as a gift, but as a debt owed by the living. Her words did not preach. They named. The leader's smile faltered. Behind him, a man shifted, uncertain. Caleb pushed up, grimacing, revolver steady despite the pain. "Last chance," he said. The leader hesitated, pride warring with survival. A sound cut through it, sharp and final. The leader dropped, surprise frozen on his face. The circle broke. Men ran. The street fell quiet but for the crackle of a burning awning. Sister Margaret knelt again, finishing the work. Caleb sagged, breath ragged. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder once, brief as a blessing, then bound tighter and hauled him up. They limped toward the edge of town as smoke climbed and lamps guttered. No one followed. They reached a low hill beyond the lights and stopped. Dawn crept pale along the horizon. Caleb sank to the ground, spent. Sister Margaret set to cleaning the wound with what water remained. He watched her, eyes soft with pain and something like wonder. "You didn't flinch," he said. "Not once." She tied the final knot. "I did," she said. "I just didn't let it choose for me." The words surprised her with their truth. She felt the vow within her, altered but intact, a compass recalibrated by fire. Faith was not silence anymore. It was motion. The sun rose. Birds dared the morning. Caleb tested his leg and winced, then smiled. "Rivertown's east," he said. "Doctor's there." He hesitated. "You don't have to come." She looked back at San Elias, at the smoke, thinning into memory. She thought of convent walls and of open roads. "I will," she said, not because he needed her, though he did, but because the road had claimed her voice and she had answered. They stood together, uneven but aligned, and turned east. As they walked, Sister Margaret felt the frontier recede from threat into question. Mercy would be asked again, she knew. Blood would be the price. She did not fear the asking. She had learned what she was made of and who she could stand beside when the world leaned in to test them.